All right, Jane and Dash, welcome to Rob van Moer Film Festival. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to kick off with the first question. Your film centers around cryptids, mythical creatures, and I was wondering how you first encountered these creatures, cryptids.
I think like everyone else, it was through like early stories that you're told as a child, Greek myths, and then I played D&D as a middle schooler, and then kind of fell out of it, and then as I got older, I met Jane, and in our I don't know, Jane started an all women's Dungeons and Dragons group.
Yeah, I got into role playing games later. It's
like
got
in your
like
20s,
such a
or?
well, I think late high school for me. I really wanted to be doing it in middle school, but it was the 90s, and there's so much less gatekeeping in that community than there was then. And so I got into it when my brother's girlfriend's dad got into it. And it sort of trickled down to me.
And he played it on like Navy ships.
Yeah. Right? So straight from the Navy to my living room, apparently.
But I wanted to write something that Jane would enjoy participating in, and she painted most of the cryptids in the movie. And another key piece was seeing this early unfinished Winsor McCay short film called The Centaurs from 1920. So there's like a master of animation who had started this cartoon about mythological beings, and it's on YouTube. It's like, I think it's very like sexy and adult, and it kind of suggested because it was unfinished, I could watch it and think like, well, what if he had made this movie? What would it have been like? It kind of, the unfinished quality of it allowed me to dream and kind of imagine, lead to writing Cryptozoo.
And then when it comes to many of the cryptids that appear in the film, when we knew we wanted to do the project, Dash specifically said, I want every cryptid in the film to be one that comes from an existing mythology. But we also wanted to kind of pull some of the weirder things. And so definitely we did some research, and here's the cat.
Weirder meaning just like I hadn't seen a Baku in a movie before. Like,
yeah, or Blemmy, Pliny, that was my first encounter with that creature, which is so strange and wonderful. And
there is a Blemmy in a Rene Laloux movie called Gandahar.
Uh-huh. But that was not one I was familiar with, clearly.
Funny that you say that you had this film as an inspiration that has an unfinished quality, because Jane, you were animation director of this film, and what I thought was interesting is that some creatures like Phoebe with the Medusa hair, she's like not even colored, like her face is still uncolored, and other creatures were so detailed and so lush, and yeah, how did you decide upon this? This does have anything to do with that other film that was inspiration?
That is, the actual decision about Phoebe was Dash's, and it was a solution to a major problem that we were having. When we were discussing the look of the film, one of the earlier decisions we made is that the magical creatures would have these like fully realized gouache painting, but still eyes, whereas the human characters would have the watercolor painting, the looser painting, and the pencil line, and then the flickering eyes. And then we wanted to deliberately break those rules. Sometimes the Alkonost has the flickering eyes. Vaughn clearly is closer to human, but is painted as a cryptid. And then Phoebe was just this huge question, because she really does float in between. And then Dash had this idea, and I was like, can we do that? Is that allowed? But Dash sold it to me.
Yeah, it was an intuitive decision that then, as we were working on it, we would talk about why we thought it worked, but yeah.
Yeah, and it also just allowed for some really great visuals, and it solved some design problems. I mean, this was a film where, you know, we would have loved to have unlimited budget, but every solution is, you know, we're trying to figure out, okay, how can we even do this? And so to have her be uncolored made some things easier, the snakes in particular, at the end of the film. And then it was just this extra fun palette for me to play with, because her jacket does change in every single scene to reflect the scene. And that was, you know, just
so interesting.
it felt right.
Yeah, and it's so much fun to watch, to see all these different styles and genres in it. Beautiful.
Yeah, you know, white is like gray, where you can put it in something and it makes the other colors look better on the screen. So you could put her in different locations with her jacket changing, and it would always look good.
Such a cool idea.
You know, I want to say the unfinished quality is something that I like in like watching animatics for movies, and you know, preparatory drawings and concept art for like amusement parks, as opposed to the finished amusement park. Like the fact that, so I that's a very intentional kind of I guess like element of the movie that is important to me.
Yeah, I love that too. I think it's fun to see the thinking in a drawing, you know, before they've made the decision, when there's still a little bit of uncertainty, and it could go either way. And
even like when Disney released Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, they had like a separate disc that was all Miyazaki's storyboards for the film, and he draws so he has kind of like a European sensibility in his drawing, and then like paired with that story, it feels like the drawings are kind of moving in and out of this fog. And if you know that movie, there's like a kind of ever-present mist in the movie. So that, and also like the Disney 101 Dalmatians, where they just decided to do the pencil drawings, and so there would occasionally be like construction drawings visible on the dogs. Yeah.
I was also wondering when, like, in which period of time this film is set, because sometimes you get some 1960 themes, and still it feels very urgent. And nowadays there's even a hint to the storming of the Capitol in there, which is, I think, coincidental.
Accidental, yeah.
Yes. I was wondering, why did you choose to set it up in this counterculture hippie era?
Well, right around when Jane had that D&D group, I had a fellowship at the New York Public Library, and one of the other fellows there was researching countercultural newspapers of the 1960s. And the New York Public Library had that, like in their archives, they had them from all over the world. So it was super, super exciting, because you could see that real optimism in them. Like even just the titles of the magazines would be like one word, like progress or something, you know, like that. And we, you know, of course we know how it's all panned out, and we know how it went down, but to see a global utopian optimism that was like a free weekly paper in Brazil and a free weekly paper in Chicago, and they felt unified. And also as a cartoonist, seeing them and seeing that they had a unified aesthetic. There was like a thin line, Art Nouveau-y, almost kind of fantasy arty drawing style that was like attached to real ideology, you know, before the internet. So meaning like something was just kind of in the water of, and it was also when the MoMA had a floor that was just 60s art. That's like my very favorite art. And
when Dash was writing the project.
Yeah, and you know, my parents were hippies, so I love my parents, but you know, there's I had this was before, you know, it was written before Trump was elected and all of this other stuff happened, but you could still see the death of the 60s, and I kind of paired it with You know, like in this movie, I think everyone in the first few, probably even before you walk into the movie, you kind of know that the Cryptozoo isn't going to work out, that it's like Jurassic Park, that the movie is going to be seeing this thing fail. So it felt right to pair that. Am I just blabbing too much? I should just, well, and then, but then when it came to actually executing it, you know,
we didn't put in the 60s.
We didn't put the year title at the, like, there was a big conversation, you know, where some people wanted it to have a year at the beginning of the movie, but I kind of felt like even just how we animate looks a little older, that it could, like, if it's gonna be kind of like that, it's gonna just be like, you know, also as someone who watches mostly old movies, part of the fun of them is they start and you're kind of like, oh, there's someone just mentioned Vietnam, like, oh, I guess this was made around that. So I wanted it to have that experience where as it's coming together, you're kind of guessing, oh, I guess this movie was kind of sort of made around this time, or, but this didn't, you know. But then some things we totally like just broke the rules on, like some of the score elements are totally not 60s at all. And Vaughn is like a very like He-Man kind of 80s, you know, being. So
Jane, maybe maybe you want to elaborate a bit more on how you made the animations feel very psychedelic, hippie-like, because you really see that in your work as an animator. Maybe you want to explain a bit more about that.
Well, I mean, I think it just, the start of it is that I love color. Like, I love color. I want all the colors all the time. And I think there's just an inherent sensory overload to that I enjoy. You know, I like to say my style is maximalist. I just all the things all the time. And you know, animation is intuitive as well. Like, so much of what we're doing is intuitive. And I think, you know, we often talk about the film as a collage film, and I talk about Dash. You know, I'm making a lot of the components, and Dash is making a lot of components, and then we have these guest stars that come in that Dash casts to do backgrounds or to do a single creature, or to do, you know, the vehicles. And so God, Dash and I, we are going the same place, but we start in really different places. Dash is very zoomed out, very loose. His drawings are enormous compared to mine. I'm like doing these tiny little things. And those things don't match immediately. And so much of the fun and the psychedelia is what can I do to make these things that are disparate work together to be part of a cohesive whole. It's the how can this be true game, which is my favorite game, both in art and in role-playing games. So yeah, you know, so much is just what pieces I'm given and how to make it work and how to try and make every single scene exciting. You know, most huge projects start with a lot of planning to keep the whole project consistent. And we never did any of that. We did planning, of course, but we weren't talking about mood boards or color boards. There were inspiration pieces, but it was really on like a scene by scene basis. And because the project took so long, there was lots and lots of room for new ideas all the time, which is the advantage of it having to take forever.
How long did it took you in the end?
I was animating full time for 4 years.
I had started the year before boarding it.
Wow.
You know, the other thing, it's like, that I want to say, I think Jane is compared to most animators, her animation is very realistic. And
I don't do a lot of like squash and stretch and bounce.
And she's, I don't know the word, well, like full animation, whereas I'm always like fewer drawings, less. So the movie definitely like meets somewhere in the middle of that.
Yeah, the final product is so much more interesting for having both Dash's voice and my voice loud and clear. I think my voice alone would not be nearly as interesting as it is when it's paired with Dash.
I think
Yeah,
it's a
totally.
beautiful combination of forces for sure.
I just feel incredibly lucky to be in this partnership that so perfectly yeah, this only happens in interviews. I don't say this to him, no, but he likes the interviews because then he gets to leave with the glow.
Only time I get praised.
I do like you.
Well, talking about voices, you work with incredible voice actors, and what I found very surprising is how real they sound. They sound very human, not cartoonish at all, not super extra. Is this something you decided beforehand, or did it just happen along the way? How did this come together?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you say that, because that's, I think, the main, not to just knock other people, but
it's hard to watch those voices that are on 11 for an entire...
I can't watch most cartoons because they have this wow wow, like very loud voice acting that I find really annoying. So that's a huge turnoff for me and makes most things unwatchable. But on High School Sinking, I think I was too far the other way. You know, it's hard because the imagery is abstract, and then if the voices feel so removed, or then it's like nothing is actually happening. Because I need the voices to be the soul of the human element of the movie. So for this one, I thought like it has to be super sincere, realistic, you know, voice performances. You know, the audience member might not agree with what the characters are doing, and so there's a distance there, but there shouldn't be a distance between, you know, what the actor from what's happening on screen, that the acting has to be sincere. So I really tried, you know, I hope it's also the movie took so long. They were some elements that were recorded separately and placed in, so there was like a collage aspect that way. But you know,
and I don't think the only actors we were able to get together physically were Louisa Krause and Michael Cera for the opening hippie sequence. And so it's just a testament to the actors that we had, that they could, you know, all they had to work with was the little voice sound recording box. They were working against opposite Dash. They had very little in the way of visuals to know what their characters were looking like, because we didn't design characters until after we had the voices.
I think
they
that
did a spectacular job.
I think that was an advantage though, because our first film, High School Sinking, the characters were drawn before it was voice cast, and we had the majority of it drawn before the voices came in. So for this one, you know, Lake Bell's character, Lauren, if Lake Bell wasn't playing her, she would have looked completely different. All of the character designs were kind of based on the actor. So I think that helped it, of course, make it more realistic, or I use the word specific instead of realistic, like as opposed to broad. You know, I wanted like, there's very
specific
broad
versus cartoony.
There's very broad cartoony things in the movie that I love, and I love that kind of part of it, but I definitely want some specificity in there too.
Yeah. I have one last question about the amazing original score that feels very melancholic and totally original. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah,
well, we're huge fans of the score too.
Yeah. Every time the film plays and I'm there, I'm doing a Q&A, like there's dancing on the stage while the credits play. I get really into it.
We live in Richmond, Virginia, you know, and like so we feel quite separate, or at least I feel separate from.
I love it here.
From, you know, the point, you know, we're working on this thing, and I feel like if I was an audience member, you know, to see a you know, adult animated movie called Cryptozoo, like it has to have a great score. That has to be part of it. That's like, if you fail on that, you're not delivering on the promise of you know, like Akira and Fantastic Planet. Like,
not that we're trying in that saying we're at that level. We aspire.
yeah, yeah.
They have these great, like, unexpected but totally right scores, and so was very much the goal. Dash was in contact with, how did you find John?
Another filmmaker here is named Rick Alverson, who does a movie called The Mountain and the
Lives
comedy.
in Richmond as well.
And he knows the label Jag Jaguar, so I called Jag Jaguar and kind of told them about Cryptozoo, and they recommended John. And I had never heard him before, but he had done an album called Travel that's like super perfect for Cryptozoo. So he had never scored a movie before, you know, and he lives in LA, and he like has a amazing life of just touring and playing with Solange and Frank Ocean and all of these people. So I met him and kind of tried to woo him on board, and he seemed kind of like, I don't know, my impression was that he wasn't that interested. And then when the movie was ready for him, he had become more well known, and he had like more albums out, but the pandemic had struck, so he was stuck at home. So he agreed to score Cryptozoo. He had nowhere to go.
I mean, the panic, like,
he was quarantined, so he scored our film, and we're very I'm glad he did.
The pandemic has been so painful for so many people, but there are ways in which it helped this movie. You know, we could not, without it, have gotten the amazing score. And just for us to be able to continue working through that, when I know a lot of productions, it's strange.
We didn't slow, like our production did not slow at all, because we were just at home painting.
Yeah, I mean, it was happening in our living room with our one employee, and it just didn't change.
Sorry to get dark there, Ben.
Sorry. And we're so glad that everyone could come to the theater, because we are allowed to do so now.
Yes, well, we are screening the film outdoor. We're keeping our distance, but yeah, well, thank you so much for talking to us. It was amazing to see your film, and thrilled to have had you. Thank you so much.
Thanks
you.
for having us.